Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a strange, sticky, and often misunderstood chapter of modern warfare. Imagine this. You arrive in a foreign land thick with green, sweating through your uniform before you've even unpacked. The air smells like smoke, fish sauce, and jet fuel. Cicadas scream in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a helicopter thumps overhead like a slow-motion heartbeat. You're here, they say, to help win hearts and minds. But no one mentions how those hearts and minds are going to be counted. And here's the catch. You probably won't survive this, not because of bullets or booby traps, but because the logic behind what counts as winning this war is enough to break your brain. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Drop it in the comments. I'm reading them in my pajamas. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're stepping off a C-130 cargo plane, boots hitting the tarmac at Tan Son Nhut Air Base. It's 1967. The Vietnam War is past its messy beginning, not yet near its tangled end. You're issued gear, a map that might as well be a children's placemat, and an uneasy sense that things here don't run by the usual rules. Your sergeant hands you a rifle and points east. "Welcome to the jungle," he mutters, only half joking. From the moment you arrive, the air feels heavier than just humidity. There's a strange detachment in how people speak, like the war has gone on long enough to be routine, but not long enough to make sense. You pass sandbags arranged like someone read about fortifications once and decided close enough. There are soldiers sunbathing near bunkers, others rolling dice on crates of sea rations, and somewhere a transistor radio crackles with a Motown tune that feels entirely out of place. Within days, you're briefed on the mission. Not a mission, mind you, the mission. But instead of clear lines or traditional battles, you're told that pacification is the goal. It's a word that sounds soft, but somehow still threatening. Securing hearts and minds, they say again. You're not sure what that means, but you nod. Then comes the first jungle patrol. It's not what you expect. You move in single file through trails lined with bamboo and elephant grass, taller than your head. Everything is green and rustling and damp. Your uniform sticks to your back. Your boots squish in ankle-deep mud. There's a surreal rhythm to the march. Swat, step, breathe. Swat, step, breathe. And every so often dash, pop dash, pop dash, pop dash, the calm breaks into chaos. Gunfire erupts, echoing in too many directions to pinpoint. You duck, return fire, and when it's over, there's a hush more deafening than the shots. You look around and ask the question everyone's thinking. Did we get anyone? That question becomes a chorus. Not, did we secure the area? Not, did we find the cache? But how many did we get? And someone, somewhere, begins to write numbers down. A couple of days later, you're in a debrief with an officer who's young, confident, and very good at PowerPoint, except, well, PowerPoint hasn't been invented yet. He flips through slides on an overhead projector with the smug energy of a man who's never been shot at. "Our unit has been extremely effective," he says, pointer tapping the screen. "Body count is up 23% this quarter." Body count. There it is again. You're not entirely sure who counted them, or how they knew who was enemy and who wasn't. But the chart slopes upward like a stock market graph, so everyone nods. The logic creeps in quietly. If you can't hold territory because the Viet Cong disappear into the jungle, and if you can't easily identify friend from foe, then maybe the only way to measure success is by counting corpses. It sounds grim, but it's the policy now. You hear whispers in the mess hall about how some units inflate their numbers. One guy says another platoon found 3 dead bodies and reported 7 enemy killed. Who's gonna check? He shrugs. Another guy jokes about counting shadows. You laugh because it's funny, until you realize it might be true. Historians still argue whether this strategy came from desperation, detachment, or sheer bureaucratic inertia. Some say it was pressure from Washington Congress wants wins, and wins need numbers. Others think the generals just like metrics. You can track numbers. You can make numbers look good. But out in the jungle, numbers don't feel like victory. They feel like abstraction. You patrol a hamlet that smells like fish sauce and wood smoke, where kids wave and chickens scatter underfoot. A week later, that same hamlet is shelled, and no one's entirely sure why. A report says, 10 enemy KI. You wonder if they were the same kids who waved. One afternoon, you're cleaning your rifle when a colonel drives by in a jeep, grinning like a politician. He says the mission is going well. He says morale is high. He says we're winning. You want to ask, how do you know? But you don't. You just nod and say, yes, sir, because that's how the game works here. You count, you report, you move on, and somewhere in the background, the jungle keeps humming. Your next patrol takes you farther into the countryside, past rice paddies that shimmer under a hazy sun. You can't tell where the water ends and the sky begins. It's just endless reflection, like a dream that won't let you wake. The squad leader points out a narrow trail barely visible between stalks of sugarcane. Viet Cong used this one, he says. You squint but see nothing. You walk it anyway. The mission is labeled reconnaissance, but everyone knows what that really means. Stir the pot, look for signs of activity, maybe make contact. And if bullets fly, then someone will tally bodies. That's the hidden goal behind every jungle step. Not territory, not peace, just numbers. You've stumbled across an abandoned camp. Bamboo frames, soot-blackened pots, a ragged hammock hanging between two trees. No people, no weapons, just leftovers of life. But your lieutenant radios it in. Possible enemy encampment, recent activity. He hesitates, then adds, estimated 2 VCKIA. You raise an eyebrow. Estimated, you ask? There's no one here. He shrugs. Intel's about impressions, he says, as if that explains everything. Later, back at base, you watch a report come in. That 2 became 5, then 10. A success. Your unit gets commended. Morale boosters are handed out like candy extra beer rations, a game of cards, a movie night under the stars. You win by numbers, and numbers lie. There's a joke going around now. How do you know we're winning? Someone asks, because the dead say so. Everyone chuckles, but it doesn't feel right in your gut. You've seen the faces of the people you pass in the villages. Blank, tired, wary. Some nod, some look away. You wonder what they're thinking when your patrol walks through. You wonder if they're counting too. One evening, you help guard a village that's been secured. The phrase feels hollow. The locals have been gathered into a cluster of huts under American protection, or, more accurately, under American surveillance. Kids peek out from doorways. A grandmother offers you something in a banana leaf. You smile, unsure whether to accept. This isn't home. It never will be. That night, gunfire erupts near the tree line. You wake up swinging your rifle, adrenaline slicing through fatigue. A few shots fired. No injuries. But by morning, the area is deemed hostile. The next day, air support flies in and levels a field. The report? Viet Cong position neutralized 12 enemy KIA. You never saw a single body. Historians still argue whether this kind of accounting was self-deception or systematized misinformation. Some say it was the fog of war. Others say it was a strategy designed not for battlefield accuracy, but for headlines back home. Either way, the result is the same. A war measured in body parts. Yes, body parts, because sometimes That's all that's left. A hand, a foot, a boot filled with something. One commander reportedly told a unit, "If you don't bring back bodies, bring years." You think that's a myth until you hear someone joke about collecting them in Ziploc bags. You stop laughing. Later, you'll read about a village called My Lai, where hundreds of civilians were slaughtered and the body count marked as victory. You're not there when it happens, but the echo of it creeps into every operation you do. Every time someone asks, "How many?" and no one asks, "Who?" you start noticing small things. How reports are written before patrols are even completed. How medals are given for numbers, not outcomes. How journalists are shown what they're supposed to see and nothing else. You watch a reporter step out of a helicopter, take a few photos, and fly back before lunch. "Big win today," his headline will read. You wonder if he saw what you saw. Empty huts, scorched trees, a little girl crying behind a collapsed fence. At night, you lie in your cot and stare at the corrugated ceiling. The fan clunks like it's trying to escape. You replay the patrols in your head. You try to remember if the man in the rice field was holding a shovel or a rifle. You try to forget the boy with the bandaged foot who wasn't old enough to be a soldier. You try and fail to stop counting, because you've started doing it too. Quietly. Automatically. One body. Two. Maybe three. Was it four? You're not sure anymore. The line between real and reported blurs faster than your memory can keep up. You hear a new phrase now. Search and destroy. It sounds clinical, efficient, almost surgical. But in practice, it means this go out, stir up a fight, and come back with a number. It doesn't matter what that number is made of. It only matters that it's higher than yesterday. You wonder if the war can be won this way, or if it was ever meant to be. You wake to the sound of helicopters, again always helicopters. Their rotors don't thump so much as gnaw at the sky, chewing through clouds and sanity in equal measure. You sit up and stretch your back, joints stiff from another night of half-sleep. Someone yells, "Gear up." And just like that, you're moving. Today's mission is different, at least on paper. It's part of a pacification campaign meant to stabilize a region by protecting its villagers. You've heard the briefing. Win hearts and minds. You've also heard the grumbles afterward. What hearts? What minds? You pack your rifle and step onto the chopper. The jungle below stretches like a living sea-thick, dark, and unwelcoming. You land near a small hamlet ringed by muddy paddies. The locals are herded together under the watchful eye of South Vietnamese soldiers. Some villagers hide their faces. One old man glares. A child holds a crumpled plastic spoon like it's treasure. You wonder where they got it. Your unit's interpreter begins questioning the villagers. Did you see any VC? Were there men with guns here last night? The villagers respond softly, sometimes not at all. One woman insists she saw nothing. Her hands tremble as she speaks. The lieutenant's jaw tightens. "They're hiding something," he mutters. There's pressure now. Command wants results. There's a quota hanging over everyone's head, unspoken but deeply understood. So a decision is made: search the village, house to house. You split into teams. A few men begin flipping mats, knocking over pots, lifting floorboards. One soldier finds a rusty revolver wrapped in cloth under a cot. It could be a plant. It could be a relic. No one cares. 2 confirmed VC collaborators, someone announces. 2 young men, barely older than you, are marched out at gunpoint. They don't resist. The interpreter says one was seen speaking with known insurgents. That's enough. They're blindfolded and taken away. Later, you hear they were never seen again. The report from this mission: 3 weapons caches uncovered, 5 VC suspects apprehended, 1 firefight resulting in 7 enemy KIA. You blink, 7. You only saw 2 people taken away. No one was killed, but the numbers bloom like fungus. Historians still argue whether the body count metric was imposed from above or just absorbed by commanders trying to stay afloat. Some say it was a coping mechanism. Others argue it was a career ladder built from corpses real or imagined. Either way, the line between truth and propaganda had been bulldozed, paved, and painted with fresh stripes. After that day, the jungle begins to feel like a stage set. Every patrol becomes a scene. Every report, a script. You start wondering if you're a soldier or an actor. Maybe both. Maybe neither. You talk to a guy from another unit who tells you how his squad found 3 dead farmers and logged them as enemy Kia. They had tools, not rifles, he admits. But what's the difference? Tools, guns, same threat, right? You want to argue, but the words stick in your throat. Then come the body part stories. Quiet, whispered, half-joking. Someone brings back a scalp. Another claims he's seen fingers collected as proof. There's a rumor about a unit using ears to track kills, dropping them in a plastic container like poker chips. You laugh nervously until you realize no one else is laughing. In one village, you're told to photograph the bodies after a strike. Standard protocol. You lift your camera, focusing on a man whose torso is intact but whose head is gone. His hand still clutches a bamboo flute. Don't show that one, a sergeant says. Pick the ones that look like soldiers. You nod. The click of the shutter feels heavier than your rifle. That night, you eat canned spaghetti and stare at the stars. You hear someone mutter, "How do we know they were VC?" Another replies, "If they're dead, they were VC." You don't know who said it. You don't want to know. The next morning, your unit is praised. High body count, no casualties, the report reads. You're called efficient. You're told you've struck a blow for freedom. But all you feel is tired. You try writing home. You mention none of this. You say the weather is hot. You say the food is weird. You ask how your sister's piano lessons are going. You try to remember a world where people didn't count corpses like baseball cards. Every few days, someone new rotates in fresh-faced, clean uniform, eager. They talk about honor and purpose. You try to warn them gently. This isn't a war of battles. It's a war of arithmetic. And the numbers don't care what's true. You wake again before sunrise, feet already sore from dreams of endless marching. The morning air hangs heavy, thick with dew and smoke from someone's breakfast fire nearby. A chicken clucks indignantly as you pass. You're not on patrol today. Today, you're processing after-action reports. You sit on an overturned crate with a clipboard, surrounded by half-withered soldiers doing the same. The forms are familiar now, each sheet, a tidy arrangement of checkboxes and blanks. Enemy Kier? Weapons recovered? Village damage? You squint at the answers a corporal scrawled with lazy confidence. 3 enemy killed. 1 AK-47. Minimal civilian impact. But you were there. You remember the firefight. Loud, chaotic, terrifying and brief. A hut caught fire. A boy was hit. He screamed, then stopped. There were no guns found. No one verified enemy uniforms. But here, on this form, the story is different. Someone from HQ walks by with a clipboard of their own. They scan reports like a grocery list. Too low, they mutter about one sheet. Need better ratios. A sergeant nods, flips a number. Just like that, 2 becomes 4. You blink. Is this war? Or inventory management? That afternoon, you're called to the company tent for a debrief. A colonel shirt too clean, boots too shiny, asks how the pacification effort is going. Mixed, your lieutenant says. Hard to distinguish combatants, the colonel frowns. We need clear success metrics we can report. You know what that means. Outside, someone jokes, We should count shadows. Might as well. You chuckle, then hate yourself for it. Later, you help organize the trophy wall. It's a photo board set up in camp, meant to showcase your unit's accomplishments. Pictures of captured weapons, destroyed bunkers, smiling soldiers. But one image stands out: a corpse laid in the dirt, half covered with leaves. The caption underneath reads, "VC neutralized." You recognize the body. He was carrying farm tools. Historians still argue whether the body count culture stemmed from deliberate policy or chaotic improvisation. Some blame Robert McNamara's system's obsession treating war as a solvable equation. Others point to sheer desperation, a flailing army measuring shadows because it had no grasp of substance. You think about it as you help stage the next round of photos. A rifle placed neatly beside a body. A bandana tucked into a dead man's pocket to suggest allegiance. You say nothing. Neither does anyone else. In a nearby village, an old woman begs you to let her bury her son. You can't understand her words, but her tone cuts through. A medic shakes his head. "Classified area," he mutters. "Can't disturb the scene." You walk away, ashamed. That night, the chaplain holds a service. He reads from Psalms, talks about duty and sacrifice. You try to listen, but the words slip past. All you can think about is the smell of wet earth and gunpowder, and the boy who screamed. You dream of numbers floating, endless, glowing on forms. Each one a ghost, each one whispering, "Was I real?" You wake again, sweating. A helicopter is taking off nearby, blades carving up the dawn. Somewhere, more numbers are being made. More stories rewritten in carbon copy. There's a rumor about a rival unit faking kills entirely. Firing into the jungle, photographing blood packs, recording radio chatter. You think it sounds absurd until someone quietly admits, "We've done it too. Once or twice." You try to push back. In the next report, you write what really happened. No contact, no weapons, no casualties. Your CO crosses it out. "You sure about this?" he asks. "We're being reviewed this week." You don't answer. He writes, "2 suspected VC killed fleeing scene." You nod. You both pretend it's truth. And the machine rolls on. You wake up to laughter this time, strange, given the setting. A pair of soldiers are joking about trading body count numbers like baseball cards. "3 for your one says, grinning. "I even threw in a foot." You're not sure whether it's sarcasm or not. That's the trouble. The line between humor and horror got blurry somewhere back in '68. Your assignment today is field intel visiting a hamlet recently swept by another company. You ride in the back of a jeep, wind blasting your face, trees whipping by like thoughts you don't want to finish. When you arrive, the villagers look exhausted. No one meets your eyes. A grandmother clutches her grandson tightly, whispering something that sounds like a prayer. It's quiet, save for the buzzing of flies. One of your guides, a local interpreter with too many stories in his eyes, points out craters where homes once stood. "They say it was for safety," he mutters. "Safety from whom?" You nod, unsure if you're agreeing or apologizing. In the dirt, you notice something strange. A tally scratched by a child, perhaps. 5 lines and a cross, like counting days. A tiny grave sits nearby, marked with a plastic spoon. The interpreter doesn't translate. He doesn't need to. Back at base, you sit in on another briefing. The maps are huge. The arrows are red. The officer talks in confident bursts about enemy hot zones and positive force engagement. But none of that reflects what you saw: the ashes, the empty eyes, the spoon. One soldier raises a question. "How do we know if we're winning?" The room gets quiet. A lieutenant clears his throat. "Body count," he says, like it's obvious. "We've eliminated over 1,200 this quarter. That's a 15% increase. You want to ask, how many of them were even enemies? But you don't. No one does. You learn something that week. There's a term, free fire zone. In these areas, any human presence may be considered hostile. It makes the counting easier. After all, fewer rules, fewer questions. Historians still argue whether this policy arose from tactical necessity or was just an easy excuse. There's a new method being tested. Aerial sweeps photograph suspected sites. Analysts circle silhouettes. Possible VC clusters, the notes say. Bombing commences shortly after. You're told to record damage. In one case, you find a charred bicycle. Another, half a rice paddy turned to glass. An officer asks you to estimate the number of enemy neutralized. You want to say 0, but you glance at the crater and say 7. He nods. Better. The next evening, a soldier from your unit comes back pale. It was a wedding, he whispers. We hit a wedding. You try to offer comfort, say something like, we didn't know, but the words feel hollow. Like the numbers you file. A few weeks later, you're at a larger base. There's a display, a chart showing progress by body count. It's color-coded with cheerful lines trending upward. Victory, someone murmurs. But below the chart, in the same tent, there's a pile of black and white photos. Dead faces, torsos, pieces. You can't look away. One image is captioned, Suspected Enemy Courier. He looks about 15. His hands are burned. Someone has placed an American lighter beside him for scale. You want to vomit. You go outside and sit in the dirt until the stars come out. That night, you write in your notebook, something you haven't done in weeks. You write, we are drowning in ghosts, and we don't even know their names. The next morning, the notebook is gone. Your bunkmate shrugs. Maybe the wind took it, he says, not looking at you. You walk past the intel tent. Inside, someone's laughing again. Got 20 today, they say. Real or not, the boss doesn't care. You feel the laughter rattle through your bones, cold and thin. And just like that, the day begins again. You're starting to notice a pattern, not just in the reports or the photographs, but in the silence between things, how people avoid eye contact, how questions linger but never get asked aloud. It's like the whole war is balancing on a delicate silence, and no one dares breathe too hard. Today your job is simple. Verify confirmed kills. That's what the clipboard says. A helicopter drops you at a recently cleared village. The air smells like smoke and wet earth. The trees nearby are shredded as if a giant had swiped through them with claws made of steel. A sergeant meets you with a nod. He's young, maybe 20, but his eyes are already far older than yours. Got him lined up, he says, chewing a toothpick. Take your time. You round a hut. There they are, 8 bodies, laid out like a grim parade. Some are dressed in black, some not. One looks like a farmer. Another might be a teacher. You kneel by a woman, her hand still curled around a rolled leaf of something, probably beetle nut. You take out your camera and click 1, 2, 3. A shadow crosses your lens. It's the sergeant watching. Gotta get the angles right, he says. HQ likes it tidy. Later, back at base, you file the report. Column 1, number of enemy KIA. Column 2, photographic proof attached. There's a third column, suspected VC status. You hesitate, then tick all as yes. You wonder if anyone ever marks no. That night, you overhear a heated conversation. A major is furious an officer from another company logged 5 kills from a single corpse. Same guy, 5 times, he mutters. Once for every body part. The room laughs nervously. Better stats that way, someone jokes. But no one really finds it funny. You recall what a vet once told you. If you want to impress the brass, Don't count bodies, count parts. They'll do the math. Historians still argue whether this gallows humor reflected frustration or became a coping mechanism for soldiers losing sight of the mission. There's something strange happening to time. Days blur together. You can't remember when you last heard good news. You dream in static now helicopter blades, gunfire, radio crackle. You wake up unsure whether you are sleeping at all. Your next assignment, escort a body count auditor. You imagine someone with glasses and a clipboard. Instead, he's a thin man in a clean uniform and crisp boots. He never takes off his gloves. "Let's keep it professional," he says. You nod, wondering what unprofessional might even look like out here. You travel together to a valley where a firefight occurred 2 days ago. The trees are blackened, the earth churned. You count 7 corpses. The auditor frowns. The report says 13. He kneels, inspects a torso, and mutters, "Could be 2 here. Depends how we count." You stare at him. "You mean?" He waves a hand. "Policy says confirmed kill if remains are present." He scribbles something. 8. That'll do. You drive back in silence. The auditor hums a tune. Something old, Sinatra, maybe. That night, you reread an old letter from home. Your sister says the neighbors lit candles for the troops. "Everyone's proud of you," she wrote. You fold the paper slowly, like it might break. Next day, there's a press visit. A few journalists with big cameras and tired eyes. You're told to guide them through a model success zone. The area's been swept twice, cleaned up, and even had a school tent pitched up for show. A few local children sit politely, repeating phrases in English. One boy wears a Mickey Mouse T-shirt. A general smiles for the cameras. "Hearts and minds," he says. "We're winning, make no mistake." Behind him, a soldier whispers, "More like hearts and limbs." You suppress a laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's all you can do. After the reporters leave, you help pack up the school tent. The children scatter. You wonder where they go when the war returns. In the debrief, someone mentions today's count. 10 confirmed, 2 probable. No one mentions names. No one ever does. And just before lights out, the sergeant from earlier appears in your doorway. He tosses something small onto your bunk. It's a pair of worn sandals. "Found them by the river," he says. "Size of a kid." He doesn't wait for a reply. You don't sleep that night. The sandals sit at the foot of your bed like tiny ghosts. You're no longer sure what normal is supposed to feel like. Breakfast is coffee that tastes like rust, and your morning routine now includes double-checking your boots for scorpions. But today brings a new kind of odd. You're heading to a command post to assist with strategic visuals. The officer in charge is Captain Fowler, a man with a jaw that looks sculpted from granite and an expression that rarely changes. He gestures toward a stack of folders. "These," he says, "are body count tallies. These," he points to a board with red and blue pins, "are what we tell the press." You glance between the two. The numbers don't match. Not even close. "You're here to make it make sense," he says. "If the Pentagon calls, we need to show progress." You pause. "You mean, adjust the?" He raises a hand. "I said make it make sense." So you get to work. You align battles with dates, shift tallies, merge ambiguous kills into larger operations. You create a chart showing an upward trend. It looks hopeful ... Fowler grins. "There, now we're winning." Historians still argue whether such statistical gymnastics were sanctioned at the top or simply evolved from the pressure to show results. Either way, it becomes clear. In this war, perception is as important as reality. After lunch, cold beans and a cigarette you tag along with a recon unit. The jungle is wet and thick, every vine a potential tripwire. You step over a decayed log and nearly land on a skull. Human, clearly. It's old, moss-covered. No body. VC graveyard, someone mutters. Or just unlucky villagers. No one seems interested in figuring it out. You photograph the skull anyway. Back at base, you attach the image to a file labeled KIA, unconfirmed. You doubt anyone will read it. The next day, you're invited to a meeting with intelligence officers. They've compiled data on kill ratios by region. One analyst, a guy who looks like he belongs in a college library, explains that some areas average 3 VC deaths for every 1 American. See? He says, tapping the map, or crushing them here. You squint, but didn't we just abandon that sector? He nods. Yes, but still look at the numbers. You wonder when arithmetic became the measure of progress in war. You remember a line someone once told you, we're counting wins by subtraction. At night, you write in your journal something you rarely do anymore. You scribble, today we counted ghosts. You stop there. That's enough for 1 page. You overhear a conversation between 2 medics. One says he treated a wounded farmer, then got reprimanded because the man was later reclassified as VC. The other laughs bitterly. Should have let him die, would have boosted our numbers. You don't laugh. Later, you find a printed newsletter meant for troops. It has cartoons, jokes, a crossword puzzle. On the back, there's a photo of a smiling soldier holding up 2 severed ears like peace signs. The caption reads, keeping count the old-fashioned way. You stare at it for a long time. Your dreams that night are jumbled a mix of sandbags, pencils, and empty faces. In one of them, you're counting your own fingers, over and over, but the number keeps changing. Morning comes, but the clouds don't move. It's like the sky is stuck. You're reassigned to a river outpost. Light duty, they call it. You arrive and find soldiers building a wall out of spent artillery shells. One nods at you. Welcome to the counting house, he says. There's a map on the wall with colored dots. Red for kills, green for captures, blue for wounded. No names, just dots. One soldier has turned the data into a game. Whoever gets the most reds in a week wins a case of beer, he says. Motivation. You wonder if you've stepped into a nightmare, pretending to be a spreadsheet. As the sun sets, you sit by the river and watch a water buffalo wade through the shallows. Its movement is slow, almost peaceful. You envy it. Behind you, the outpost blares music something loud, American, out of place. But you stay by the water, counting ripples instead of bodies. You find yourself standing in the cold, fluorescent-lit nerve center of MACV headquarters, the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, where victory isn't measured by flags raised or territories held, but by neat rows of numbers climbing on charts and graphs pinned to sterile walls. It's a peculiar kind of corporate jungle, where war metrics are mined, analyzed, and repackaged like quarterly earnings reports, and body count has become the key performance indicator for success. Imagine sales teams obsessing over quarterly profits. Only here, it's about how many enemy soldiers are confirmed dead. You, walking past rows of officers in pressed uniforms and wrinkled brows, realize that this is less a war room and more a data factory. Victory is a spreadsheet, a line graph, a bar chart, sometimes even a PowerPoint slide. And no matter how surreal that sounds, the higher the numbers, the better the headlines back home. In this strange world, you overhear phrases like metrics-driven strategy and operational effectiveness being thrown around with the same casual certainty you'd expect in a corporate boardroom. The body count becomes a buzzword, a KPI designed to quantify progress in a conflict where actual territory is fluid, and the enemy refuses to stand still long enough to be conquered by conventional means. The brass at MACV even initiate quarterly after-action reviews. Presentations where commanders compete to show their kill counts, like sales managers showcasing quarterly revenue, except the product is, well, human lives. You catch yourself wondering if anyone has ever pondered the eerie irony of this. Setup historians still argue whether this obsession with numbers ultimately doomed any meaningful grasp of reality on the ground. You peek over the shoulder of a major who is fervently tapping at a keyboard, entering kill counts, territory, pacified percentages, and engagement reports. His computer screen glows with spreadsheets full of numbers that could be interpreted any way you want. You remember a fringe tale about a general who reportedly asked subordinates to pad the numbers to keep morale high, because in a war where no one could quite claim outright victory, the illusion of success was the only real currency. The consequences of this body count economy ripple outward in unexpected ways. You realize that incentives, promotions, and even supply allocations become tied to these numbers, pressuring officers to deliver high kill tallies rather than sustainable victories. Meanwhile, in the back rooms, you learn about kill ratio targets, how many enemy soldiers must die for every American lost, and how these ratios are sometimes adjusted post factum to assure reports look good. There's even a rumor that some units encouraged over-reporting, treating the battlefield like a numbers game where everyone wants to come out on top. But behind the spreadsheets and buzzwords, you hear stories of soldiers trying to reconcile the cold math with the messy, chaotic reality of combat. One young lieutenant you overhear whispers about the moral burden of counting bodies as if they were coins in a cash register. In the middle of it all, you find yourself oddly detached yet entranced, as if the war is less about people and more about data points, flowing into a machine designed to digest human lives into neat, digestible statistics. The very concept of victory becomes abstract, reduced to numerical targets and quarterly reports. You might even say the body count became a kind of currency, a bizarre economic system fueled not by goods and services, but by death and destruction. It's a bleak kind of war capitalism, if you will, where success is measured by the number of units eliminated, and the only growth curve that matters is on a graph. And yet, in this sterile haze of numbers, you catch glimpses of something profoundly human slipping away. Soldiers on the ground who know the difference between a counted body and a lost comrade, civilians caught in the crossfire of statistics, and commanders wrestling with a system that rewards quantity over quality, kills over hearts and minds. You wonder whether any of these charts ever capture the real cost of the war, because historians still argue whether metrics, like body count, helped prolong the conflict or hastened its bitter end. So, while you stand there in the belly of the MACV machine, the sound of clicking keyboards and rustling papers almost lulls you into a dreamlike state, like a strange lullaby of bureaucracy. The war is being fought and won or lost one number at a time. And somewhere between the buzzwords and spreadsheets, you realize that in this corporate war game, the true measure of victory was always just out of reach, forever slipping between the cracks of a chart, like a ghost no one could count. You trudge through dense underbrush, the humidity wrapping around you like a heavy blanket, as your unit prepares for what's supposed to be a straightforward search and destroy mission. It's the kind of operation where confirmed kills are the currency, but the ghosts of what happens next haunt the air. Today, your squad is heading to My Lai, a hamlet tucked away in the South Vietnamese countryside, where something that should never have happened in a civilized war will unfold. You hear hushed whispers about the incident, though official reports carefully avoid the word massacre. Instead, it's referred to as a tragic event, a breakdown of discipline, but historians still argue whether it was a result of poor command, the pressures of the body count, or something far more sinister lurking beneath. As you enter the village, you notice the eerie silence contrasted with the bright smiles of some villagers, a strange dissonance that leaves you uneasy. The soldiers move with mechanical precision, but behind their eyes, you sense something breaking. Reports from that day claim high enemy body counts, yet eyewitness accounts tell a darker story: women, children, and elderly civilians caught in the crossfire. The official tally listed hundreds of Viet Cong killed, but the reality was far more grim and far more complicated. You think back to the sterile headquarters, where numbers meant everything, and wonder how those statistics came to justify such a horror. You remember a quirky tidbit you once read, that some soldiers used to joke about counting coup, like Native American warriors. But here, it was morbidly literal and lethal. That day at My Lai, counting bodies wasn't about proving victory. It was about covering up failure. You overhear a veteran's quiet confession. The body count system created perverse incentives, pushing soldiers to inflate numbers or worse, commit atrocities to meet unrealistic quotas. It's a sobering contrast to the cheerful graphs you saw earlier, one that reminds you that behind every statistic is a human story, often untold. Night falls as you sit by a campfire, the crackling flames casting shadows that flicker like ghosts from the past. The incident at My Lai still haunts the military psyche, exposing the dark underbelly of a war obsessed with body counts. The event sparked outrage when finally uncovered, shaking public trust and forcing a reckoning with the true cost of the counting obsession. But even now, historians still debate whether the My Lai massacre was an isolated breakdown or an inevitable outcome of a war where victory was measured by the number of dead. You think about the soldiers who survived that day, many haunted by what they witnessed, forced to reconcile their duty with conscience. Some tried to blow the whistle, risking careers and reputations to expose the truth. Others stayed silent, swallowed by the fog of war and bureaucracy. You wonder how many other villages bore similar scars, lost in the vast count of casualties that never made the headlines. In this moment, you grasp how the drive for numbers, for body count as proof of progress, warped the very nature of warfare. It turned people into data points and missions into missions to tally kills rather than secure peace. And so, as you close your eyes under the dark canopy, the ghosts of My Lai linger, a chilling reminder that some victories come at an unpayable price, one that no spreadsheet or statistic can ever capture. You step into a room buzzing with the awkward energy of a ceremony that feels more like a twisted talent show than a celebration. Here, the prize isn't a trophy for heroism or valor. It's an award for the highest body count, a macabre badge of honor that rewards the grim calculus of war. You watch as soldiers receive medals, not for saving lives or strategic brilliance, but for the sheer number of enemies they've neutralized. It's the kind of spectacle that makes you wonder if the military brass confused warfare with a particularly brutal video game leaderboard. The atmosphere is thick with forced smiles and congratulatory backslaps. But beneath the surface, you sense the uneasy truth. This is a war where killing is incentivized, celebrated, and sometimes even gamified. You overhear chatter about the Kill Ratio Cup, a not-so-official award given to units boasting the highest kill-to-loss ratios. It's a grim contest, yet one taken seriously enough to be marked on performance reviews and promotion boards. Soldiers joke that not quite laughing that the ceremony is like the Oscars, except everyone's hoping not to be nominated next year. It's a surreal moment where the value of human life is quantified down to a statistic, and the metrics of death decide who stands taller. Historians still argue whether such awards contributed to inflated body counts and reckless behavior, or if they were simply morale boosters in an otherwise demoralizing conflict. You recall a quirky story about a sergeant who once tried to use his most kills award as a conversation starter on a date with predictably disastrous results. The war's strange trophy culture extended beyond the battlefield, embedding itself into the soldiers' identities in ways that felt both absurd and unsettling. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving your worth through numbers. Commanders encouraged competition, believing it would drive effectiveness. But you can't help but wonder if it encouraged shortcuts and cruelty. As the ceremony continues, you watch a young soldier accept a medal with a hollow smile. You imagine the private moments afterward, how he might lie awake, haunted by faces behind the numbers, wondering if any of those kills were truly justified. The disconnect between the sterile award and the messy reality of combat gnaws at you. You think back to earlier briefings where kill counts were dissected like financial reports, and realize how deeply ingrained this obsession with numbers had become. In the end, you realize this bizarre ritual highlights the war's tragic irony. The more kills celebrated, the less clarity there was about what winning actually meant. The awards, the ceremonies, and the charts all masked a deeper uncertainty. Was this really victory, or just survival by the slimmest margin? And as you leave the room, you carry with you the unsettling thought that in this war, the highest scorer was never quite a hero, just the deadliest player in a game no one wanted to win. You trudge through the thick jungle, every step muffled by the wet earth, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle deeper than the humidity. Here, in the tangled undergrowth and the patchwork of hamlets, the line between enemy, civilian, and something in between blurs into an indistinct smudge. You start to wonder, who really counts as the enemy? Is it the armed Viet Cong fighter emerging from the shadows, or the farmer tending rice paddies, silently watching you pass? The U.S. forces face this dilemma every day, tasked with identifying a faceless foe hidden in plain sight, where the only constant is suspicion. You hear soldiers joking bitterly about the 3 Bs, buddies, bandits, and bad guys categories, meant to simplify a complex human landscape, but failing miserably. Sometimes, the enemy is just a man caught on the wrong side of a checkpoint, or a villager coerced by circumstance. The body count doesn't discriminate. It tallies dead regardless of allegiance, blurring moral lines into a gray fog. Historians still argue whether this ambiguity contributed to the widening of the war's scope or merely reflected an impossible situation on the ground. One curious anecdote sticks with you. Some units reportedly carried kill identification kits, with them sets of ear tags or finger markers, designed to confirm enemy kills, yet often resulting in confusion and misidentification. You imagine the surreal scene of soldiers trying to verify kills by collecting body parts, a grim and bizarre trophy hunt that feels both clinical and profoundly unsettling. This practice gave rise to rumors and dark humor among the troops. Body parts as badges, a grotesque memento mori from a war gone sideways. Walking past a village, you notice the wary eyes of children watching from behind bamboo fences, their smiles polite but guarded. Civilians often bore the brunt of the body-counted session, caught between U.S. forces eager to prove progress and Viet Cong fighters hiding among them. The in-between wasn't just a tactical problem, it was a human tragedy. You hear whispered stories of entire villages being cleared based on inflated enemy numbers, leaving scars that would last long after the war ended. In this murky theater of war, the concept of enemy becomes a shifting target, sometimes literal, often metaphorical. You start to feel the weight of this uncertainty pressing down like the jungle itself, dense and impenetrable. The metrics on paper never fully capture this complexity, and you realize that the obsession with body counts might have only deepened the confusion. It's a cruel irony. The very measure meant to prove victory instead underscores how little anyone really knew. So, as you push forward through the humid air, you carry the unsettling truth that in a war measured by numbers, the line between friend, foe, and innocent blurred beyond recognition, leaving a haunting question hanging in the thick air. Who, exactly, were you counting? You move cautiously through the moonless jungle, where shadows dance like phantoms between the trees, and the only sound is the rhythmic crunch of your boots on the leaf litter. Night patrols are a different beast altogether, a time when the body count numbers seem to swell mysteriously, like a ghost story retold with every sunrise. Soldiers whisper, about inflated kill reports. Those moments when the fog of war gets so thick, even the statistics start to lose their grip on reality. You hear rumors that some units turned the darkness into a kind of advantage, reporting kills that may or may not have happened, all to keep the numbers looking good. It's a secret everyone knows, but rarely talks about out loud. You remember a quirky tidbit from a veteran's memoir. One patrol claimed dozens of enemy dead after a brief skirmish, but when daylight came, they found nothing but disturbed earth and startled wildlife. The phantom kills became an open secret, a bizarre byproduct of the body count economy. Soldiers joked about killing shadows, but the jokes were a thin veil over the uncomfortable truth that numbers could be manipulated as easily as whispered stories around the campfire. Historians still argue whether these inflated figures were a desperate attempt to maintain morale or a symptom of a broken recording system. As you trudge through the thick undergrowth, you start to understand the pressure soldiers faced. Every kill counted, not just for survival, but for promotions, supplies, and even food rations in some cases. The need to report progress pushed some to stretch the truth, knowingly or unknowingly. Commanders turned a blind eye because, in their view, progress was progress, no matter how it was measured. This unofficial policy created an environment where truth became malleable, and statistics became a kind of battlefield propaganda. You also learned that night patrols were a breeding ground for tall tales and exaggerated reports. Soldiers would report firefights that were actually moments of nerves and confusion, and any signs of enemy activity would be turned into inflated kill counts. Sometimes, body parts were recovered after the fact to justify reports, lending a gruesome formality to the process. This raised uncomfortable questions about what counted as a confirmed kill and who decided. In this moonlit haze, the body count figures lose their solidity, becoming as elusive as the Viet Cong themselves. You begin to see the war not as a series of clear victories or losses, but as a fog of half-truths, misreports, and desperate attempts to impose order on chaos. It's a war where numbers tell stories, but those stories are often more fiction than fact. And as you navigate this shadowy world, you realize that the body count was less a measure of success and more a mirror, reflecting the confusion and desperation at the heart of the conflict. You find yourself in a sun-drenched village market where chickens cluck underfoot and the air smells like herbs, wood smoke, and faint diesel. But it's not the sights or sounds that hold your attention. It's the strange tension beneath them. You're not here for combat, at least not today. You're here to meet the locals, many of whom have learned that in this war, their survival depends on balancing two equally dangerous sides. The Americans bring rice, radios, and promises. The Viet Cong bring ideology, fear, and sometimes bullets. You begin to realize that for the people who actually live here, this isn't a war of ideology. It's a war of careful negotiation, of whispered decisions made after dark and repaid in blood. You hear about something called the body count economy, a term whispered by cynical officers and tired villagers alike. It's not a formal system, of course, but an unspoken network of rewards and repercussions. If a village cooperates with American forces and provides intelligence, or more morbidly, helps confirm body counts, they might receive extra supplies or protection. But the cost of appearing too helpful? A visit from the Viet Cong at midnight, complete with retribution and quiet disappearances. Historians still argue whether this dynamic was a byproduct of poor strategy or an unavoidable feature of counterinsurgency warfare. A quirky tidbit surfaces during your visit. In some areas, local children were said to play games pretending to be MACV advisors, complete with toy guns and fake radio calls, mimicking the Americans who offered them candy and school books. But just as quickly, those same kids could recite slogans from the Viet Cong mimicry, or not from ideology, but sheer survival. You watch them laugh, completely unaware of the razor's edge they walk daily. You're shown a list handwritten, barely legible of names supposedly belonging to confirmed enemy dead. Except when you cross-reference the names, some appear again weeks later on different reports, while others match villagers still alive and trading fish at the dock. The body count economy has many incentives, but accuracy isn't one of them. Local militias sometimes exaggerate their own kill counts to gain favor with U.S. forces. In return, they might receive more weapons, more food, or simply more attention from American commanders desperate to show results. This grim barter system leads you to meet a former village elder, his face lined by sun and sorrow. He explains, in halting English and soft Vietnamese, that sometimes the easiest way to protect your people is to give the soldiers what they want: a name, a location, a number. Whether that number corresponds to a true combatant or a cousin's unfortunate rival is flexible. It's a system built on uneasy compromises, and nobody comes out clean. You realize that in a war measured by body parts, there's currency in death, and for villagers caught in the crossfire, survival often means learning how to trade in it. So you leave the market not with a clear idea of who the enemy is, but with a deeper sense that the war's moral compass has been spinning for so long, no one even notices anymore. The body count economy doesn't just affect soldiers or commanders. It distorts every level of interaction, turning daily life into a ledger of risks and favors, where survival is calculated and the numbers always lie. You settle into a folding chair inside a dimly lit operations tent, surrounded by the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the shuffling of paperwork. Here, in the rear echelons of the war effort, the battlefield feels far away, almost theoretical. There are no gunshots, no helicopters, no booby traps. Just typewriters clacking, coffee slowly cooling in chipped mugs, and piles upon piles of reports. So many reports. This is the paper war, where battles are fought with pencils and carbon copies, and victory is measured not in terrain gained or lives saved, but in the neatness of a line graph. You watch a junior officer fiddle with a kill report, adjusting numbers with the precision of an accountant finalizing a budget. It's not necessarily deceitful. He tells you dash, just dot, dot. Interpretive. The categories are flexible. A probable kill might become a confirmed kill if enough soldiers agree, or if someone swears they saw blood. Historians still argue whether this gray zone was a failure of command, a cultural flaw, or just an inevitable symptom of trying to quantify a war that didn't want to be quantified. There's a fringe but true story circulating. In one region, a commander reportedly signed off on a report claiming 13 confirmed VC kills, despite the footnote clarifying that 6 of them were based solely on enemy activity inferred via soil disturbance. You let that sink in. Dirt. Dirt was enough to justify a number on a chart. The deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. Some units developed formulas for estimating casualties after airstrikes, often based on bomb tonnage or the number of secondary explosions, essentially. Guesswork dressed up as math. The temptation to inflate numbers was always present. A more impressive body count meant more praise from higher-ups, more resources for your unit, and sometimes more peace of mind. After all, what's a better way to cope with a confusing, unwinnable war than to pretend you're winning? Clerks and officers alike learn the rhythms of what looks right. A report with too few kills might suggest incompetence. Too many, and it invites scrutiny. So the numbers are massaged, tweaked, rounded for clarity. 1,000 tiny paper decisions, none of them malicious in isolation. But when added together, you get a version of the war that looks very little like the one unfolding in the rice paddies and jungle clearings. You overhear a staff sergeant mutter, "It's like we're managing a factory, not a war." And in a strange way, he's not wrong. Reports are treated like production metrics. More kills equal more success, even if no one really believes it. The paper war creeps into everything. Even medals and commendations are sometimes awarded based on these metrics. There are stories quietly circulated, of course, of soldiers who never fired a shot but received Bronze Stars for combat effectiveness, all based on glowing paperwork from the rear. The inverse is just as tragic. Soldiers who fought bravely, lost friends, and held impossible ground, only to be marked as underperforming because the body count was low. As you watch a young corporal erase and retip a figure for the third time, you feel a strange sadness settle in. Here, far from the bullets and blood, people are still trying to win a war, but they're doing it with data, and data can lie. You think back to the villages, the patrols, the uneasy silence in the jungle, and realize, no matter what the reports say, the truth doesn't live on these pages. It lives out there, in the dust and fear and confusion, and no amount of paperwork can capture it. You sit on the tailgate of a dusty supply truck, boots dangling, as a convoy idles nearby under the baking sun. Somewhere behind you, senior officers toast another successful operation, raising paper cups of lukewarm coffee over a printout of clean, upward trending charts. Victory, they say, is just a matter of metrics. And on those glossy, laminated pages, everything looks perfect. The body count is up. The kill ratio is favorable. The maps are dotted with cleared hamlets. You hear laughter. It sounds hollow. But around you, the faces of the soldiers tell a different story. They're not laughing. They're not celebrating. They're staring at their boots, nursing wounds, scribbling letters they'll never send. You catch one guy quietly counting dog tags on a chain his squad's memorial, warm close to his chest. The disconnect is stunning. On paper, the brass say you're winning, but the ground tells a darker tale. You hear about a commander who once asked, in full seriousness, why morale was low when the numbers showed such progress. One of the grunts allegedly responded, "Because, sir, we bury more friends than we make kills." Historians still argue whether this cognitive dissonance was willful ignorance, or just the natural consequence of trying to spreadsheet a guerrilla war. Either way, it created a surreal world where statistical victory could exist right alongside emotional devastation. There's a quirky tidbit floating around base. Someone made a parody newsletter titled The Body Count Times. Its headlines read like satire. Our kill ratio is great. Ignore the missing platoon. Another article cheerily listed top 10 ways to make your reports pop, including tips like use adjectives and round up creatively. At first, the higher-ups found it funny. Then they banned it. You spend time with a squad just back from an ambush. They lost 3 guys. The report said enemy repelled with heavy losses. But no one actually saw how many enemy fighters were hit. The jungle swallowed everything. The squad leader, a tired man with cracked sunglasses and a cigarette fused to his fingers, mutters, "Maybe we got 2, maybe 0. Either way, that won't stop them from calling it a win." And so the paper victories pile up, even as the body bags come home under the cover of night. You help carry one. It's heavier than you expect, not just with weight, but with finality. There's no column for this. No metric for the sound of a mother weeping thousands of miles away, or the dreams that won't return with the man inside the bag. The numbers don't record that. You start to notice how the vocabulary shifts depending on who's talking. For the generals, it's sustained pressure, measurable results, quantifiable outcomes. For the soldiers, it's Charlie got Mikey last night, and we've been in this same village 3 times this month. The people living the war speak in memory and gut. The people managing it speak in percentages. As you pack up for the next movement, you glance at a chart pinned to the briefing tent's wall. It's covered in arrows, boxes, and numbers, many of them, suggesting you're winning. But out in the field, the enemy still controls the night, still recruits, still blends into the trees. If this is winning, it doesn't feel like it. And in that quiet moment before the engine starts, you realize the body count never really told the truth. It told a version of the war that comforted the powerful, that gave structure to the chaos, that made everyone feel a little less helpless. But the real war, the one you just trudged through, refuses to be counted. You sit under a rustling tarp as rain taps gently overhead. It's the kind of sound that might lull you to sleep if not for the soft thunder of artillery in the distance and the whispered chatter of exhausted men around you. You're supposed to be rotating out soon, though nobody really believes in schedules anymore. Everything here runs on jungle time, and hope is measured in degrees of silence. You look around at your squad. What's left of it? Some are writing in tiny notebooks, others just staring at nothing. There's a sense of going through the motions, of counting down, even though nobody knows what they're counting toward anymore. You can't help but reflect on how the war was explained to you when you first arrived. There would be patrols, firefights, hearts, and mines, and then ... success, whatever that was supposed to mean. Now, after months in this surreal theater of calculation, you understand what success really meant to command. It meant numbers. It meant climbing graphs and favorable ratios. It meant the body count, always the body count. But out here, those numbers look like silhouettes in the night, like panicked villagers ducking behind trees, like your buddy slumped beside a rice paddy with no final words, just a shallow breath and then nothing. There's an unspoken truth that threads through every base, every foxhole, every chopper ride. You all know it. You're not winning, not really. You're surviving. Sometimes. Historians still debate whether the body count obsession began as a genuine attempt to quantify progress or as a desperate bluff, a wartime version of whistling past the graveyard. Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. One of the guys jokes that if the war were measured in leeches removed, you'd all be generals by now. Another says the only real metric is how many cigarettes you've bummed and how many pairs of socks you've ruined. It's dark humor, the kind born not from callousness, but from sheer emotional fatigue. It's a way to cope when the war stops making sense, when enemy combatants includes barefoot teenagers and body counts are made up in conference rooms miles from the jungle. The documents back at HQ still roll out weekly. There's talk of momentum, breakthroughs, and sustainable progress. But those words don't land here anymore. Not after what you've seen. The language of the war has drifted so far from its reality that it feels like two separate conflicts. Entirely one fought in sterile offices with clean uniforms, the other in the mud with a rifle and bad dreams. You're reminded of something you heard a few weeks ago. A soldier muttering after a long night patrol, "They'll count the bodies, but they'll never count the cost." And that sticks with you. Because the true toll, the mental scars, the fractured villages, the mistrust that hangs like a fog over every smile, can't be added up in a spreadsheet. You think about the villagers again. The old woman who gave you rice, even though her son was missing. The boy who mimicked your salute. The girl who sang something soft while everyone waited for the mortar to stop. Their faces won't show up on any charts. Their stories won't be briefed to Congress. But they are the war, just as much as the rifles and reports and airstrikes. The rain begins to fade now. The jungle exhales its thick, earthy breath, and the night presses in again. Somewhere, a radio crackles with coordinates. Somewhere else, a new set of figures is being typed out. Another victory, perhaps. Another day, another line on a chart, another whisper lost in the trees. And you realize this war, the one they tried to count, was never really about numbers. It was about people. And people don't fit neatly into columns. They vanish, cry, resist, surrender, change sides, change back. They survive sometimes. They disappear often. They matter. And now, as you rest your head against your pack, letting the hum of insects wrap around you like a lullaby, you finally allow yourself to believe what you've known all along. This was a war that couldn't be counted. And now, as the final echoes of this strange, number-haunted war fade into the stillness, you feel your thoughts softening, like jungle mist settling over forgotten trails. The tension in your shoulders eases. The breath in your chest slows. There are no more radios crackling, no more charts, no more hurried footsteps through wet leaves. Just quiet now. You're far from the briefings and body counts, far from the maps and memos. The jungle is distant, and the war, whatever it was, however it was measured, has slipped into memory, taking its contradictions and unanswered questions with it. Maybe it was never supposed to make sense. Maybe that's the lesson. Maybe that's why you're still here, listening, drifting, remembering something that never quite added up. Your eyelids grow heavier with each passing second. Even the softest sounds, crickets in a far-off thicket, the drip of condensation off canvas, the occasional rustle of wind against leaves, begin to stretch out, blending into silence. There is no urgency now, no reason to count anything at all, only rest. And if your mind still clings to a face or a fact or a fragment of the war, let it wander gently. Let it dissolve like fog at sunrise. You don't have to understand all of it. You don't even have to try. Just breathe. Just listen to the quiet, because tonight the jungle sleeps. And so can you.